Baker Mayfield.
Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's poppin', Rush Nation? Welcome to week 2's flagship show. There appears to be as many injuries last week as, well, what seemed like last season in total. Everybody we drafted is potentially injured, hurt, and out for time. Hope you drafted those running back handcuffs like we told you to, not clog up your bench with, well, clog. As always, I am joined by the flag bearer extraordinaire for 5 Yard Rush. Big man, how are you with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing Denver this week, strolling towards a 3-0 record?
I mean, mate, a pleasant surprise to win in Ford Field and get revenge on the playoff game at the weekend. And I never thought I'd ever see the day that Baker Mayfield was compared to Barry Sanders. But there we are. This is 2024. I loved it. He basically creates this run where he does like this little shimmy and he beats the linebacker to get a lot of additional yards. And then on the very next play, runs it in for a touchdown. And they literally got a clip of Barry Sanders doing the same thing. And I was like, that is really taking the mickey. You've taken a quarterback who, let's be honest, is becoming more mobile as the weeks go on, and fair play to him. But hasn't been necessarily known as a mobile dual threat quarterback. And then once he is scoring the winning touchdown, as it turns out to be, at Ford Field, you've then referenced a legend of Ford Field. And basically said this quarterback is basically like that, like Barry Sanders. I mean, listen, there's been some phenomenal analysis across the NFL this week. That was brilliant. Bo Nix is still my favorite.
What, the quote?
Oh, superb.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just decided that Bo Nix might be one of my favorite individuals of all time, just for the way that he handled the question. I think it's superb.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that haven't seen it, the reporter asked Bo Nix to talk him through the interception, and he said, "I stepped back and threw it to the other team. No nonsense, no messing around. Well done, Bo. I appreciate that. With 2 games in, yeah, I got that right. That was about the gist of it, right? He said I threw it to the other guy. Yeah,
pretty much word for word. It's a couple of words missed, but yeah, pretty much nailed on. And I think I just love that. Like we've seen some players get sort of a bit finicky with questions. We saw it was a good double for me with Arsenal winning the derby as well on Sunday, and Ange Postecoglou getting a bit chippy with a female reporter. And I just think if you're gonna go no nonsense, like slap a reporter down, that's the way to do it. Just completely no nonsense, completely factual, but no context quote is just superb. Like, just literally like, yeah, I just drop back, through the ball the other team. Next.
Yeah.
I just think brilliant. Listen, I think it's an interesting time in the NFL. There seems to be a lot of annoyance with all these injuries that have occurred, and there is a large amount of injuries that have occurred, of course, but I think on top of that, you've also got this sort of scenario where you've got people quite happy with where they are with their teams and their builds. And then I guess now we're starting to get into the point where we need to analyze what we did well, what we didn't do well. And I'm not saying we overreact, but we have to start week 2. If you don't start making changes to your rosters over the next few weeks, you're going to struggle. So part of this, I've pulled up some advanced analytics. I've got some stuff here that we can talk through, and we can have a look at how we're reading certain situations and how to make some pivots, maybe some trades that we can try and get done, trade ideas, etc. And any participation in the chat, as always, is more than welcome and appreciated. Just before we do get started, I do want to give an apology to those waiting on FFCC results. So I am nearly done. So all the main draw is done. And everyone that then drops into the plate, I have all that configured and done. I'm just doing the Squid Game stuff. So there's a little bit more the way here. It will be done tonight. I'm posted tonight, so if you're still waiting, if you're in the main event, if you have the link that I dropped in the chat, in your division chat last week, then you can access that and you'll be able to see what the scores are, but I'll do a full reveal of stuff. ASAP, Stocks, you won your matchup.
Yes,
you're in round 3. I
take that, cheesy.
I put up a good score and lost, so I'm going to have to go all in on the plate, which is fine. Standard half of the course. But yeah, I think we're in an interesting state with the NFL now with a lot of injuries. We've lost, some big names and names dropping sort of all the time. We've had some surprise results, Baltimore losing, the Eagles losing.
Twice.
Yeah, I mean, the first one's probably not a big shock, but yeah, Bengals 0-2. You've got some good teams that are 0-2 now. You've got some poor teams like the Chargers that are 2-0.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I saw a thing that says teams that start 0-2 are 11.5% statistically to make the playoffs from this position, which isn't.
Unless you're Cincinnati, then you get a bit of a bump because they typically always start 0-2.
Well, that's true. They are the exception that buffs the rule or whatever. But
So
yeah,
everyone
that's
else
another.
would melt in, but
Yeah.
Cincinnati are all right. They've probably risen that number up all by themselves over the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's probably 5%.
But yeah, it's going to be. So there's 9 teams with a 2-0 record, and there's 9 teams with an 0-2 record.
18. Okay.
And so that makes 14 teams with a 1-1 record.
Yeah. Is there more 2-0 teams in the NFC or AFC, or is the record split evenly across the NFL?
Well, there's 9, so no, I think there's more 2-0 teams in the AFC. I think it's 5-4. I'm fairly certain. Oh no, hang on.
I don't have any of that in front of me, so I'm not going to go looking for it.
Yeah, it's 5. It's 5. It's 5 in the AFC, and it's 4 in the NFC, and 2 of those teams are in the NFC South. So
well, how about that?
Tampa currently the 5th seed at 2-0.
And the other ones being the absolutely on fire Saints, right?
Yeah, who've scored. They have a weird stat of 15 possessions, 15 scores so far this season.
You've had a couple of pennies if you put a quid on that, wouldn't you? Saints scored on every.
Listen, what they do against the Panthers, I don't think anyone took that seriously, and it's kind of fair enough. But Alvin Kamara had a game, 4 touchdowns. Should have been 5, but Derek Carr robbed him of 1 with a goal line vulture. And here's the funny thing is, so I'm looking at waiver wire stats, like waiver wire columns, and I always like to see what other people are thinking, and like not necessarily rating my analysis against them, but I was just like, have I missed a trick? Is there something I'm not quite abreast on? Is there something I've not quite done? And I'm seeing like in lots of these places, Derek Carr is like the lead quarterback grab this week, and I'm like, dude's not been that good. Like, I'm not saying he's been bad, but my point is that, and I said this on the waiver wire show, that the Saints are not going to play any better than they are right now. This is like peak scoring on every possession. Derek Carr this season, in this season, has thrown. I'm just finding the total number. He's 30 for 39. That's a cracking percentage. Don't get me wrong, it is, but that's also less than 20 attempts a game. So that is a problem. He has 443 yards passing. So that's 221.5 a game. That's not really going to get it done. He has 5 passing touchdowns, which is 2.5 a game, and 1 interception. Now, that's not bad. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, Derek Carr's terrible. When he's, I don't want people to take me out of context here. But as the top quarterback fantasy ad this week, a guy throwing 220 yards and 2 touchdowns a week with no rushing upside. He has rushed this season. I can't even see it. It's not much.
That far.
Yeah. He's got 14 yards on the ground in 3 carries. So This is what I mean. Like the top waiver ad for quarterbacks this week, not Geno Smith, not Justin Fields, no. And I'm like, this is the like almost as good as it gets for Derek Carr. And I know there's an argument of, oh well, they've been winning games so big and then they've just been running it out. And like that is true. And there's an argument that when they start trading a game, then they might throw a bit more. And like I can buy that argument a little bit. But the top waiver ad, I wasn't having. I was like, give me Geno Smith, give me Justin Fields. I'll take Derek Carr as third. So
Murph, just breaking news coming in that the Chiefs are re-signing Kareem Hunt. Yeah. Where does he now rank on the waiver wire grab?
It's a tough one, right? Because you look at what they've got there, Carson Steele, and Samaje Perine, and you would have to say that on paper, Kareem Hunt goes right in at the top. However, how much juice does Kareem Hunt have left? So, I said it on the waiver wire show. I'm kind of leaning towards Carson Steele as the guy, but I actually think this could be just a complete like minefield. That for me, I'm a bit surprised they went Hunt over someone like Fournette. But then Hunt knows the scheme, he knows the playbook. Like he could just go out there and he can roll, so he's not going to need a lot of time to acclimatize. He's played with a lot of these guys. Let's not forget this organization cut Kareem Hunt, right?
Yes.
For a I can't remember. Was it he assaulted his girlfriend in a elevator?
Yeah, in a hotel.
It was something like that. Like if I've got that wrong, I apologize. But I know it was for a domestic. It was a domestic assault that was caught, and the tape was released, and he was cut within minutes from this organization. So it's a tough one because you want to say, well, like, what are they doing taking him back? I'm like, well, he's played for teams since then. All right, he played for Cleveland.
Yep.
Cleveland have kind of shown where their moral compass is already. But I think we're at this stage now with Kareem Hunt. I was like, I don't know. I saw him last year with Jerome Ford. I'm not convinced he's got a lot of juice. Like he could be a good 1B back. He's very archetyped to Samaje Perine, which makes me think that Perine probably is out of the way. So I would still put my chips a little bit in. I'd hedge. So I'd be willing to put a small amount of fab in on Carson Steele. And if someone outbids me with a silly amount of money, then crack on.
But that's going to happen, right? We see that with fab every week. The new hot list, people overbid.
I think if you're willing to put in $6-7 of fab, I saw 5 or 6 in the video, highest 7. And if someone goes 10, 12, 15, 20, like let them. Like just don't chase it. There will be better. The rate of injuries that are going on, there'll be better options next week. One of the things I would be quite tempted to do if he's still on your waiver wire is looking at Bucky Irving. Now, I kind of had him quite low down. And then I was reading a report saying that there's potential that Rachaad White with this groin strain, he did come back in, but he was clearly affected by it. There is a chance that Rachaad White misses this week.
Yeah. And that makes Bucky a much better play than Hunt, right?
Yeah, and especially against Denver and all those sorts of things. So,
all right.
We have had a question in the chat. Hey, guys, just trade away Brian Robinson for Jameson Williams. Thought it's a non-PPR league.
Brian Robinson's been good.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Like, Amon-Ra had a better week this week. I don't actually know Jameson Williams' stats from this week just gone, but unless you are stacked at running back and the way the running backs are in trouble at the moment, I don't know. I think I want the Brian Robinson side of that.
Yeah, I think if you told me if it was PPR, I'd probably swing back the other way. But given that running backs are a commodity, Listen, I think this pod has proven, unfortunately, and I don't quite know how it's happened, but we are Brian Robinson fans. We think that he is going to, and apologies, I'm just pulling up something. For me, he was a massive buy at what he was in the draft. He was a massive buy range. And I think for me, I think I'm just not inclined to give up on him because he's clearly the dude there. Hang on, he's posted, I'm really stacked. My starters are at RB, Barkley, Gibbs, and Mason. Well, Mason is only a few weeks stash play. Like, he is really, you're going to get 4-5 weeks out of him. I don't hate it. I mean, I'd have to know what your sort of wide receivers are, and the one thing we don't have is context here of the whole roster. But I don't hate it because it's not like you've got a bad player. You've got a player really on the rise who's had 2 very, very good weeks. But having said that, I also think, he is being Brian Robinson Jr. at the moment is in standard scoring, and that's what I was trying to pull up, is RB11. He's had a 14.9 point week and a 13.6 point week. And that 14.9 point week was against probably one of, if not the best run defense in the league. So I think there's good weeks ahead for Brian Robinson Jr. So I think that consistency piece is a big one to trade away. But as we've seen through 2 weeks, Jameson Williams is that upside player. He can give you that real big sort of boom. Let's see who you've got here. So you've got Moore, Waddle. Yeah. I mean, you've got a lot of guys on your bench. You've got a lot of like Ross Cogsey. But now I see it, right? You've got Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas, and so you're thinking of a guy that's going to put you over the top. And I can see that. I don't hate it. I would rather have, I'm with you, I'd rather have Brian Robinson, but it's not like you've been fleeced here. I think it's all down to preference. Bill, my buddy Bill Robinson, yes, and then he's put, I have Hall and Cook. Should I offer Mason as trade bait? CMG manager has neighbors. I mean, I love that. If you could get it, I would. I'm assuming that's PPR, right? So I do love that. Like, I think if you get him as PPR, if it's standard, I'd probably see what you can get for him. But yeah, but George, back to George. I like your roster, man. I think it's decent. Like, if I go back to this, I think I can see it both sides. I don't think you've lost out, but I think for me, given the amount of injuries, you're one running back injury away from being FC UK'd at the position. But you have got Irving there, who might be a good play for week 3 if White misses out. So, but then the way it's going, if you end up, if James Conner or Kyron Williams gets injured, then you've got those positions covered. So, bit of a gamble, but I think it's a reasonable gamble because you are chasing that upside in Williams. But yeah, and back to Bill. Yeah, I mean, I think you could offer Mason as trade bait for neighbors. I'm sure he's probably saying no. I'm going to talk about neighbors and his ridiculous target share in just a bit. But again, I think you've got Hall and Cook who had phenomenal weeks and are really cooking right now. It depends who else you've got behind. But yeah, if you can get something for Hall now, or Mason now, you've got probably 4 weeks to use him and trade him, and his trade value will go down every week. So every single week that we go towards Christian McCaffrey potentially coming back, his value is going to go down.
Yeah. Oh, talking of the Giants, the stat of them being the first team in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns, not concede a touchdown, and still lose is ridiculous.
It's only the Giants.
I know. That's the Washington kicker had himself a game. I can't remember.
No, especially considering he's just come off the sofa, like because they cut their kicker last week against the Bucs.
No.
Yeah. KJ Orr got cut. It's Austin Siebert. He literally signed Tuesday, Wednesday.
Wow. Okay.
So he's come straight off the bench. It's like, cheers, guys. I'm here.
That's ridiculous. That is even more ridiculous. Look,
Austin
gosh.
Seibert, and the thing is, in those leagues like the FFCC where kickers score loads, no one's drafted Austin Seibert because he didn't have a team. So all those points just casually wasted in the void that no one can touch.
God, the void. Come on then, as we're talking about the Giants, tell me about this Malik Neighbours ridiculousness.
So Malik Neighbours currently leads the NFL in target share. So he has seen over 2 games 25 targets already, which is better, I think, only by Cooper Kupp. And he is seen 35.7% target share, which is the most in the NFL.
35%.
3 players. Yeah, 35.7%. He's just ahead of one player, and then there's 3 players above 30. Can you guess who the other 2 are?
Cooper Kupp, didn't he have 21 targets week 1? Yeah. So he's got to be there.
So he's 35.5%.
And then 2 more.
No, 1 more. So Neighbours, Kupp are 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
Third in target share, and he's the only other one above 30%.
Okay, so I know. Didn't Keelan Allen have a lot of targets week 1? Cortland Sutton had something like 12 targets week 1.
Yeah. It's not him.
It's not him. Okay. Is it a name I should be picking out, or is this? Is this rogue? Like,
say so. Let's put it this way: he wasn't going in the first 4 rounds of fantasy drafts.
Oh, for the love of God! What about Istavas for the Bengals? He's had a few targets. I know it's not him. Okay, not going in the.
Okay, I'll narrow it down for you. They're on. He's on a 2-0 team.
I mean, that doesn't.
I've narrowed it down to like 18 players. It's pretty good.
Players and
Max
Verstappen. No, not him. Oh, God. And you're gonna have to tell me, Murph. We're gonna lose viewers and listeners and all sorts.
Chris Godwin.
Oh, that clue could have been much better, if I'm honest.
Well, yeah, I could have said, "Oh, I've got his jersey hanging up in the wardrobe." 32.7% is Chris Godwin's target share at the moment. Absolutely balling out in that Liam Cohen offense. And if you listened and tuned in, we talked about Chris Godwin. We talked about Deebo Samuel as players that we're talking about. Deebo Samuel is going to miss a couple of weeks, which is unfortunate. Deebo Samuel's 4th on this list, 29.2%. But there's other players. So Keenan Allen is in there. He's 11th. One player we should talk about who we were quite high on, and a lot of viewers are going to panic on, and I'm just saying don't just yet, is Michael Pittman. So I get Michael Pittman's not had a great season, and a lot of that is down to the quarterback play of Anthony Richardson. Having said that, he has still got a 28.3% target share. Yes, he only has 52 yards. That's not good. I get it. But having said that 28.3% that he is suffering from a little bit from Josh Downs not being there. And I think Josh Downs is getting very close to returning. And I think what happens is, with the way that they are set up and schemed, they don't really, all they've got is deep ball guys and Michael Pittman. And they're lacking kind of what I said about the Ravens with how they were using Isaiah Likely and Justice Hill because they don't have a bona fide slot receiver. Kind of the Colts are in a very similar place. Anthony Richardson doesn't have anyone short to intermediary. Don't forget they lost their tight end start the season or preseason, so they've been running Mo Alley Cox, but they're not a big tight end usage team. So they're really struggling with some easier throws to Anthony Richardson, which is why every time he's got the ball, he's just rocket launching it, because you're basically putting 2 people on Michael Pittman and he's struggling to beat a double coverage. And then you've got the only success they're having is with Alec Pierce and Ashton Dulin well over the top. So they need Josh Downs in there to be a disruption and to start drawing coverage. And when that happens, the target share of Pittman isn't going to drop too much lower than where it is now. Might drop to 25, 24%, but I don't think it'll be dropping too low. So when you factor that in, his target percentage and all the peripheral numbers are all decent. It's just the fact that it hasn't converted well, and that will change. It will just take a bit of time. So don't panic on your Michael Pittman shares at all. Like just try and stay level with it. Other players who've got really good target shares that you should be keeping on. Keenan, you mentioned, is there. Rashid Rice's is outstanding. Amon-Ra St. Brown's jumped right up after this week. So you got no worries there. Although there is a slight injury concern. I was looking towards the end of the game and he was really hurt. So I don't think he will miss time, but it's just one to keep an eye on the injury report. I reckon he'll be on the injury report this week. But some standout players that I would pull out of here, and these are all above sort of 20%. Brock Bowers, 23.9%, has been solid. If you took him at tight end, he's definitely sort of doing a really, really good job. 156 yards, so it's not bad for a tight end. 15 receptions is really good. So you'd be pretty happy with Brock Bowers right now. And then you've got this situation in LA, in the Chargers, where I kind of thought that this was a week for Josh Palmer to kind of make his statement, to be the wide receiver one on this team. And it didn't happen. The guy who made the statement on this team was Quentin Johnston. And Quentin Johnston was the guy who we really saw sort of excel himself. So both Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston have 23.9% target shares, which is phenomenal. So going back to George's team with the trade for Jameson Williams, he's the 25th ranked receiver. He's got 23.8% target share, which is great. But at the moment, Sam Laporta's target share is quite low. The person who's going to suffer if they decide to go back to Sam Laporta is Jameson Williams. It's really hard in two games because they've been in two really tight games. They went to overtime on Sunday Night Football and they lost. Effectively, they had a drive to win the football game against the Buccaneers and they didn't do it. And they gave the ball back with 2 seconds left. In those situations, it's really hard to see what the real Lions is. And are the Detroit Lions going to go back to Sam Laporta in games they're in control in? We've lost Stocks for a bit. And when that does happen, who is going to lose out? And part of me thinks it's going to be a little bit of Jameson Williams. So his target share at the moment, 23.8, feels a little soft. And he's averaging 100 yards a game, which is phenomenal. So I'm just worried that he could suffer a little bit. Inversely, we don't know because we've not seen an on-fire Jameson Williams who's healthy, who's not banned from dominating. And it could be this was the plan all along and Sam Laporta has benefited from a Jameson Williams quiet period, I guess is what we will call it. I don't know. So yeah, there's those things to consider. Some really surprised players over 20%. Rashid Shaheed, 22.5%. The guy has 169 receiving yards in 2 games. He has multiple touchdowns, 7 receptions. Not a person we would think would have those kind of receptions. Now, again, I think as the Saints decide to throw the ball more, how much does that affect Rashid? But I don't see Rashid's usage going away. I think if they throw it more, it will, if nothing, increase. So it's actually quite reassuring to see these numbers on Shaheed. And if you took him, he is someone now that has to be a start play most weeks if you've got him on your bench. And I appreciate he's a bit of a nightmare and it could all go wrong, but it's one you should definitely be monitoring. Ray McCloud has a surprising 21.8% target share. And he's the leading target receiver on the Atlanta Falcons. So you've got all those amazing weapons, and the guy who's getting all the targets is Ray McLeod. I mean, that is just nuts. So yeah, I have no real words about what's going on there. It's just interesting. We look at this, and then if we look at the percentage of teams' air yards, this is also really interesting. So a lot of these won't surprise you too much, considering like the nature of the teams they're on. So like Calvin Ridley after Sunday has now got 60% of his team's air yards. Malik Neighbors has got 56% of his team's air yards. It's those two effectively isolated targets on their team, especially Neighbors with near a 36% target share. But it's interesting that Devontae Adams has got over half his team's target share air yards.
Mic check.
Yeah, can hear you loud and clear, buddy. George Pickens has 53% of his team's air yards. And then a bit of a false stat in here. You've got Justin Jefferson in here, who has 176 air yards and 47.6%. But of course, a huge chunk of those was that big touchdown from Sam Darnold, where he basically threw it from the back of his own end zone. But Jameson Williams, this is something that supports that Jameson Williams trade that we talked about earlier. He's actually sixth in percentage of team air yards, of 47%, which is really, really strong. So there's some really good peripheral signs here to back up some of these players. Rashid Shaheed, by the way, is 11th. Garrett Wilson's in there, a player I've never been too high on, but he has a 29% target share and a 44.9% air yard share, which is great. But it's those 10 targets and 117 yards that's a bit of an issue in that offense, and that offense kind of needs to improve in order to get there. And then the last one that I always find interesting is the yards per route run. Now you have to kind of extrapolate out some of the people that have only got like a couple of receptions. So I do exclude anyone that's got under 5 receptions. So Rashid Shaheed has over 5 yards per route run, which is just insane at the moment. And then Chris Godwin is second on this list, which for a slot guy, it just tells you how much he's winning at the moment. Chris Godwin is second in yards per route run over guys who've got over 5 catches. He's got 15 catches, 200 yards, and he's got a 4.65 yards per route run as a slot guy. It is genuinely baffling that he has that kind of usage and volume. So a lot of what we've been talking about is this thinking about players that we drafted and where to potentially make corrections. And a good way of looking at this is and some of the data I've shared here, is to look at these overall numbers, and these are your peripherals. So if anyone like on the chat wants to just ask me and say, oh, let's look at target share of certain players. But the point is, there's some players here that were heavily overdrafted that are not performing at this moment in time, and let's exclude injury to quarterback or injury to injury to themselves. See, there's a couple of players here that are really not performing great guns right now. Cortland Sutton is one. 20.8% target share, 16 targets, but he's only got 5 receptions. It's all on his quarterback play. Same with Deontay Johnson, 12 targets, 21.1% target share, but he's only got 5 receptions. So a lot of that is on the play of the quarterback. That's kind of holding him back a little bit. There's some that are game scripts. So Chris Olave's only had 8 targets, so he's got a 20% target share. But having said that, he's been the subject of game script where the Saints have taken an early lead and then dominated. They haven't had to go big on Chris Olave and heavily rely on him. So, you don't need to worry about Chris Olave per se. But there are some players that were taken quite early in drafts that are a real concern. So let's highlight some of these. Drake London's had 10 targets in 2 games. He's got 69 yards. 18.2% target share, and he's been blown out by Ray McLeod, which is just not what you want to see. I talked about it in depth last week that I think a lot of that's to do with Kirk Cousins, and I think that's a big issue. He got a touchdown yesterday, which kind of saves him for a week. But there is a real concern as to what happens with this Atlanta offense. I'm not going to beat overhead what he did last week. I thought Kurt played a little bit better, but I don't think he played a lot better. I thought he was really good in the 2-minute drill where he just didn't have to think. And, I think when he just went into instinct mode and they went through, and I watched a clip off the Manning cast. And I don't watch a lot of the Manning cast, but it was interesting to have Matt Ryan on. And Matt Ryan was saying that those 2-minute drills are plays that they know from, like, they install early in camp. So, like, the 2-minute drill is just the plays that they know best. And that's the ones they tend to go. That's the ones they tend to go with. So that's why he probably felt the most familiar, because they're the most plays. I almost think that Atlanta just need to run a 2-minute drill more frequently, even if they're not in a 2-minute drill, and just let Kurt get comfortable, because he clearly doesn't look at up until then. That's affecting someone like Drake London. So if you drafted Drake London high up in your drafts, you're paying a significant penalty right now for that play. Another one is Stephon Diggs. Now, Stephon Diggs scores 2 touchdowns week 1, saves in week 1. He's down to 12 targets, 10 catches, 70 yards. You take those 2 touchdowns away, he's only got a 17.6% target share. It's not particularly great. We look at someone like Jamar Chase, 11 targets through 2 games. All right, 10 receptions, but only 97 yards. He doesn't score a touchdown. All of a sudden, you're really struggling. He's only got a 16.9% target share. He's got less of a target share than Mike Gesicki, which is just, and there's no T. Higgins. Maybe he's suffering from T. Higgins not being there, and that might be a significant issue. Tank Dell only has 4 receptions for 37 yards, but he has 11 targets, 16.2% target share. It's just not really going to get it done, Tank Dell, on current pace. And I know there's a lot of mouths to feed, and they're trying to fit everyone in, but it's really looking like the Nico Collins show and Joe Mixon show, and there's nothing else. Other players that you drafted early in drafts that you need to be a bit concerned. Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman is a player I was heavily worried about in the season process. He had just 1 target on Thursday Night Football. So he's up to 6 targets for the season, 4 catches, 51 yards. 14% target share is not going to get it done. Brandon Ayuk has a 13.8% target share, but Christian Kirk has a 13.7% target share. These guys went really, really early in drafts. Christian Kirk has 2 catches all year. He caught 1 for -1 yard, which is just awful. I was waiting to see Stocks. Are you back now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yay!
Good, he's back. I was just talking about teams and their players who were drafted high, and we've got to watch their target shares. Kyle Pitts has a 12.7% target share. Got that touchdown week 1, but not good. A player I'm worried about right now, who I took a bit of late, is Brandon Cooks, only a 12.2% target share. I thought it would be higher than that, and it hasn't transpired. Dalton Kincaid, 5 targets he's got, 5 catches for 44. He has an 11.9% target share. It's hard to talk about Jalen Waddle's target share when you had Skylar Thompson throwing the ball last week, but he has an 11.8% target share currently. Tyler Lockett, 11.6% after that good week 1. That all faded away in week 2. Travis Kelce is only 11.3%. He's only got 4 for 39 on the season. So there is some real concerns over some of these players that were drafted high. Jacoby Myers is also one that's really suffering. So if you were using him as a safe floor, you're kind of really struggling right now, because Brock Bowers has taken all of that floor. So
yeah.
I guess the thing to get away is yes, it's only 2 games. Yes, there might be some stories and underlying stories, and I talked about some of them there. But inversely, if you're sitting there waiting for like a Keon Coleman breakout, or you're sitting there waiting for, Dalton Kincaid to come back to where he was last season, I hate to tell it to you, where we don't have those situations, like we have no injuries on the Bills right now in that offense, that's going to be a really hard slog to stick with. And if you're sitting there banking on a Keon Coleman breakout like in the next 2 weeks, I hate to tell you, I just don't think it's gonna work out for you. And I think you've got to come up with plan B. If you're sitting here waiting for Drake London and Kyle Pitts to light a fire, again, I think you're going to be waiting a little bit too long. Your season could be over by the time they start picking up. So you need to start thinking of plan Bs. There are plan Bs on the waiver wire. There is, DeMarcus Robinson. There is Tyler Johnston. There is Quinton Johnston. These are players right now who are getting the football. And these are players that you need to prioritize, perhaps over some of those waiver wire running back ads. That actually you think if you're sitting here waiting for a Keon Coleman, a Drake London, a Kyle Pitts, a Deontay Johnson, even a Marv Harrison. I know he scored like a boatload of touchdowns and yards, but that doesn't. He had 1 week he had nothing. He had another week where he's eaten. Don't necessarily take it as we don't know what the baseline is yet. But if you're sitting here trying to work out like what to do with some of these players, even someone like Terry McLaurin, who has 8 catches, which is fine, but he's only got 39 yards. There's another player, right, has a good target share and the peripheral numbers are there, but Jane Daniels is struggling to throw the football. He's struggling to throw it downfield. I almost feel like we've got another Justin Fields situation I had. His completion percentage wasn't too bad in their win against the Giants. So I think when you've got these players, you need to start picking up these guys on the waiver wire at wide receiver, like a DeMarcus Robinson. Like if Shaheed's on there, he's a must-add. Quinton Johnston is a must-add. These are guys that are going to, Tyler Johnston, these are players going to get you the time that you need for those players to click. If you're sitting there just putting Drake London and Terry McLaurin in your lineup every week and Keon Coleman, and you're hoping that's just going to do it, I hate to tell it to you, that right now, everything I'm seeing, it's not going to pan out for you in a good way. And when it does, it will be too late. So I almost think you need to start thinking about pivoting. And you've got players on the waiver wire this week who can buy you some time.
Yeah, these guys that you just mentioned, it feels as if this is a 2-week play because everybody apart from the Rams receivers, because of necessity, I feel as if people are giving these guys you just mentioned, they want to see 1 more week. And that 1 more week, when it does come, they won't be available. So now's the time to go and get them, as opposed to the Rams guys who are going to play this week because there is nobody else.
100%. Well, I think DeMarcus Robinson was added quite a bit last week, but he's still available in like 75% of leagues. Tyler Johnson is still heavily out there, and he's going to play a lot this week. You mentioned someone like Tutu Atwell. Maybe he does come into this week and gets a go. I'm not so sure because Tyler Johnson's there, but you never know. But Quinton Johnston, to me, looks like a guy who's going to be a play for the rest of the season that we can chalk off what we see. And I get it. They played the Panthers. It was a push lineup, but that was a lineup that they could have peppered Josh Palmer. All the noise was that Josh Palmer's going to be the one. And what we've seen out of 2 weeks is it's Quinton Johnston, it's Lad McConkey, and Josh Palmer's not a thing. Like Josh Palmer can go off your roster. That might come back and bite you in the backside. But if you're 0-2, you've got to start changing the lineup. You've got to start changing the game. You can't sit here and wait for these guys to turn up because before you know it, you go 0-3, 0-4, your route back into the playoffs is really tough. Now, if you've had a bad start and you've played the top 2 teams in scoring and your team's good, that's a different scenario. You've got to take the context with this. But if you're sitting there playing, these players I've talked about, and you're hoping for them to come good, and you've now got competition for these players. Like Quinton Johnston, anyone's a Deebo Samuel owner is going to go after Quinton Johnston. They're going to go after DeMarcus Robinson. They're going to go after Tyler Johnson. So you're going to need to be aggressive. And if you need to throw 15, 20% of your fab and you're 0-2, I don't hate it. I really don't. Because the worst thing you can do is do nothing when you're 0-2 and you're relying on these players. Yeah. Like that is, I would rather take a shot and it not work and go, well, at least I tried. I tried something different. It didn't work, but that's part of the game. But if you're sitting there waiting then that's the worst thing you can do, because if you're 0-2, you go 0-3 next week, you're out of time. Like 0-3, you get to 0-4, you can come back, but the percentage is really small. Get to 0-5, you are done. You're done at 0-5 because you have to effectively run the table. Maybe you get away with one more loss, maybe two, but you're going to need all the luck in the world to run good. So, it's really important. You look at the context of your league, you look at who you're playing next week. Maybe you have to get a trade done. If you're sitting there with guys like Drake London and some of the players I've mentioned, I sort of did a bit of a blank there, but Josh Palmer, Terry McLaurin, Kyle Pitts, even Marv Harrison, Deontay Johnson. If you're sitting there, Chris Olave to a point. Now, I think Chris Olave comes good. You're probably not trading him at a big point, but you need the Saints to start getting in some tighter games for Chris Olave to start coming along, because his numbers aren't great. So I think we're in a situation now as a roster. You've got to start thinking about how you can utilize and make plays, and maybe you start swapping some of these, potentially for running backs. One of the things I've got here is running back percentage of snaps played as a team. And I've got it's called the bell cow stat, basically. And there are some really alarming numbers in there for players that were drafted very, very high. There's some stories to be told about some of these for sure, but there is a deep concern about some of these players. So again, that plays a part into it, that you have to review your roster. We could do running backs in a minute, but I just want. What about you? What are your thoughts on, if you're sitting there with an 0-2 team, what would you do, Stocks, in this scenario?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you need to you have to be proactive, and you can't. There will be 0-2 teams where they've been incredibly unlucky with injuries and stuff, and the chance of them turning around will be slightly better. But it's hard for me at 0-2 to sit there and do nothing. Obviously, I'm going to be active on the waiver. I'm going to try and do some trades, but the people I'm going to try and trade with are either doing better than me or are worried about the players I'm trying to get rid of. So I find this 0-2 point of the season really difficult to get trades done, because I'm trying to improve my roster by getting rid of the players that I'm worried about to people that are doing better and don't need to do those trades. So there is a really fine, I find this part between now and week 6, if I'm in a bit of a bind, a really difficult time.
Yeah. And I think there's some quick wins out there for you. So for me, I would be sitting there. So I think for me, if I'm trying to think of how to get additional points onto my roster, right? And you say to me, right, how can I get additional points on my roster? Well, I go and find the guy who has Tua Tagovailoa as a quarterback. Now, in a Superflex, this is much harder. But in a 1 QB, if you've got the guy who took Tua and doesn't have much else behind, then I'm looking at that person and I'm saying, right, there's a deal to be done here. I can trade you a quarterback. We don't know how long Tua is going to be out for. You're going to need something. Your season could be done by the time Tua gets back. So let's do a trade. Let's work something out. And I think that there's something that could be done there. And I think you don't even need to pick up a quarterback in return. You could pick up a big piece at running back, at wide receiver for the quarterback. And then pick up the quarterback off waiver wire, pick up Geno Smith, for example.
So let's box this out there, Murf, and potentially who could you? So the team who has Tua, why would they trade one of their big pieces? Who would they be wanting to get rather than picking up Geno off the waiver?
Well, I think there's two contexts to this. A big piece, probably not. But if you're looking to get a piece, so if they've got Tua as a starting quarterback. They obviously went heavy at wide receiver and they went heavy at running back, and they punted the quarterback position, right? So there's chances they've got good players at the bottom end of their roster in the flex, in the on the bench potentially. That could be a really good package deal to do. And if that team has a stacked roster and there isn't a lot of quarterback option for them, and they're a quarterback away from really kind of putting on a good charge, then there's a good case to be had to take away some of their big players. Now, I'm not saying like the elites, like the Breece Halls and the, the players that have put up a lot of big numbers. Like you're never going to get like a Chris Godwin or anyone like that, right?
Yeah.
But let's try and come up with some realistic targets at quarterback. For me, I think you probably get a deal done. It'd be quite hard to get someone like Rashee Rice, but that might be something. Michael Pittman, who I think is an undercooked asset, that seems to me like if the tour owner has Michael Pittman, has been really spooked by the start, I'm sitting there going, and before anyone comes at me and goes, well, why are you sitting there, like you're worried about Drake London and Kyle Pitts and you're not worried about Michael Pittman. It's two big things about why I'm not worried about Michael Pittman. The first is his target share is just ridiculous. It's so high regardless, right? He's lacking a piece that's going to come back, is going to make his life easier. The second thing is the Colts are not going to play any worse than they are right now. They've got Shane Steichen, who's one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL. They are not going to be any worse than they are right now. So you are buying what I view a depreciated asset, a player who was drafted high, who has not performed, but there's a reason he was being drafted high. So I think you can tempt away. And if I was, I would be quite happy as a sage advice, forget the tour argument and trading for a quarterback. I would be trying to acquire Michael Pittman this week because all his numbers, peripheral numbers, are all solid. What it lacks is a bit of production. But the story is really easy to tell. You get Josh Downs back, Anthony Richardson starts making some throws, the volume goes up a little bit, and all of a sudden Michael Pittman starts getting 100-yard games again. What's not going to happen with, say, someone like Drake London is every week Kirk Cousins will get a little bit better, but we don't know what that offense looks like. There's too much turnover and change. Ray McLeod is still the leading target shareholder in that team. Why? We don't know. A lot of it's probably to do with Kurt's injury. That could change, but we need something to happen, i.e. Kurt to get healthier or Kurt to get more confident for that to change. So something has to actually change from what's going on right now. What only needs to change for Pittman is a receiver to come back and Shane Steichen to figure it out, which I back Shane Steichen to do over almost any offensive coordinator. Again, I don't think you're going to see the Colts will not play any worse than they are right now. It will only go up from here. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win, make the playoffs or anything like that, but their play is only going to go up from here. So you can buy, for me, Pittman owners will be sweating right now, and I'm telling them not to because I think that 28% target share is massive. The 15 targets in 2 games is massive. It's all going to come together. It's not going to take a long amount of time. And that's why I look at him and think that's an asset that I really want to be out there. So whether that's two owners got that, or whether you think you can just release him from his current team, you've got an owner that's spooked about the Colts play, and they're spooked. Like, just buy in on it, because I think you can get him at a very good value. I think you could probably trade someone like a George Pickens, someone like Jameson Williams potentially for Michael Pittman. If that would be a phenomenal trade. If you could trade Jameson Williams for Michael Pittman, I'm slamming that. I think that's a great bit of business to do, and I think you'll come out ahead as a Pittman owner. Other players. I think you go ahead.
I was just going to say, Murph, we were talking about Tua, and the Dolphins have just placed him on IR.
Oh well, there you go. I hadn't seen that, so. There you go. So he's not going to be back for 4 games. So now that makes that trade to the tour owner even more So you want to try and get a piece now because it's not now you've taken the guesswork out of it. This is really good news if you're trying to, if you and I don't be afraid to give up your quarterback unless your quarterback is the only two I probably wouldn't trade are Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, maybe Lamar Jackson, but anyone else I'm probably quite happy to chuck away, and that goes to Patrick Mahomes. I think you could quite comfortably chuck those players away, get a couple of good pieces back to rebuild your team, pick up a Geno off waivers, or whoever's on waivers, and play that game. And I think you'll be better off doing that because I think you'll add points to your roster, and I think the depletion from whoever your quarterback is, unless it's a Hurts, an Allen, or Lamar Jackson, down to what you'll pick up won't be as much as what you'll hopefully add to your starting roster every week. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to think of net positive points. So attack the Tua owner, especially if that's their only quarterback. Now, if they've got two quarterbacks, that play doesn't really work. So then you have to think about depreciating assets that are going to come good. Michael Pittman, for me, stands out as the biggest depreciating asset that will come good out there based on his peripheral numbers. If you're looking for other players, I think George Pickens will only improve significantly. And he might be a player that you might be able to acquire because people are worried about Fields not throwing the football. Again, I think you acquire from free agency. I'd be aggressive on Quentin Johnston or Demarcus Robinson or Tyler Johnston. I think if you can try and get, it's hard to say like who people are willing to give up really because they're going to need to obviously get something in return. But you're going to have to be aggressive, I think, if you're an 0-2 team and you're sitting there waiting on Terry McLaurin, Drake London, all these sorts of players to get going because you're not going to have the time, especially if you had like Jordan Anderson on your team. He's like, you're going to be out for a little time, or you're struggling. You've got like Jaden Reed and, the Packers aren't going to throw the football. So Jaden Reed's kind of not really a big option. And Christian Watson, and you're stuck with all of these perennial pieces while you're sitting there waiting for Jordan Love to come back. So I think that's a really important part to try and think of. And then on the running back side, some potentially sort of undercooked assets. I don't think there's too many, to be honest, because I think the running back position is already getting quite weak. Obviously, the Jordan Mason owner is going to be looking to ship. So you might have to pay the price. If you're an 0-2 team, you might have to pay whatever price they're looking for Jordan Mason in the hopes that he stimulates your team enough to get some wins before he loses his job. And you might have to pay that price. In Dynasty, that's easy. You're going to have to throw a pick. And you'll probably, give up a late second pick and you'll get him. And that might be more than enough. And if you've got designs of winning this year, and you've started badly because you've lost CMC, then that's a trade you should probably do. If you're playing in redraft, I'd probably pay up for Jordan Mason because I don't think you're going to get anyone along that's going to be as attractive as him. He currently has the most, he has the biggest percentage of his team's rushing attempts of anyone in the NFL. Wow. And by the way, he's going to get more now because Deebo Samuel's out.
Yeah. It's a big buy because we don't know how long CMC's out for, right?
You're going to get 4 weeks. You're going to get 4 weeks as a minimum. But then what if CMC isn't fully healthy? I just talked about potentially that Jordan Mason, it's a bit of a gamble. But on the flip side of that, I'm also thinking, well, if you're 0-2 and you're desperate, you can't think about 5 weeks from now because 5 weeks from now, your season could be over. So you actually just need to get wins on the board. And if you have to buy those 4 wins now and then deal with the problem down the road, then that's what you got to do. You're going to have to think about this. Again, if you're sitting at an 0-2 position, you have to start thinking about players that you can get. And Jordan Mason's right at the top of players that you're sort of quite likely going to acquire and be able to acquire. And for me, he's a much safer bet over someone like J.K. Dobbins, for example, who I think there is a ticking time bomb on J.K. Dobbins, and I hate to say it more than anybody. But the guy has a 38% rushing share, which isn't a lot. He's made a great deal of it, but there is a limited amount of time that production is going to happen until something happens. And so I'm just not buying that as long as I can throw it. You might be able to get Jerome Ford because he hasn't lit it up yet. And that might be a really good time to get in on Jerome Ford because there's only one way for Jerome Ford to go, which is up. And on top of that, I don't know when Nick Chubb's back, and I think Nick Chubb will be eased in slowly. I don't think they're going to go big. So I think you could, I'm thinking about him and his numbers. They're not particularly impressive when you look at it. But again, I think depreciated asset. They've been in close games. They've got some easier games coming up on the slate. I think he's someone who's going to get a lot more at the football. You're going to have people that are going to throw away Gus Edwards for nothing. I'd be watching him. I would be stashing him somewhere. I'm not saying that he's going to be brilliant or exceptional, but I see a pathway to if J.K. Dobbins goes down, where does all that work go to? It's not going to go to Vidal. It's going to go to Gus Edwards. You might get a little bit of Vidal, but I think it's mostly going to go to Gus Edwards. So if I'm playing who's going to be fit, he's going to be fitter longer and healthier longer, it's going to be Gus Edwards. And I think he's lost some juice. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's incredible, but I think, again, depreciating asset who could come good. He is a particularly good one to try and go out there and acquire. Brian Robinson, I think, is a great one to acquire. Again, we had him already in the show. He's not put a boatload of like yards on the board yet, but he's done really, really well, I think, and he's got a near 50% rushing share, which leads his team. He's getting a nice amount of targets. We didn't think he'd get that many targets out of his team back share, out of his team's sort of target share. So he's got 20% of his team's fantasy points, which is really good when you consider they've got like Jaden Daniels. Yeah. And he's getting, 16 fantasy points a game right now. That's a player that people are going to think time's going to run out on. So maybe you just buy in because I don't think it's going to get any worse for him. Another one is Rachaad White, right? Rachaad White's coming off a really bad game where the Buccaneers decide they're not going to run the football. That's fine. People have been talking about, Bucky Irving's going to take over. Bucky Irving's going to take over. I'm telling you this for free. Bucky Irving's not taking over. Bucky Irving might get the work in between the 20s, but all the high-value touches in this team are all going to Rachaad White. So Rachaad White might miss week 3. He might miss week 3. I don't know. I'm a little concerned. He did go back into the game. I said this earlier. But all the high, important value touches are all going to go via Rachaad White in this team from a ground perspective. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to have a phenomenal season. He's going to be a top 8 running back. But I think you're going to be able to acquire him for fantasy owners that are nervous. And I think that's what I want to prey on those that will look at his last performance and go, yeah, I'm just not sure. I just don't think I think they're buying the hype that Bucky Irving's going to take over the carries and this and that. And you're like, okay, fine. Well, look, I'll take him off your hands.
Yeah.
It's fine. What do you want for him? I'll chuck you. I mean, I don't know what it will cost. With the injuries, you're going to have to pay a bit of a premium, but I wonder if you paid up someone like Zay Flowers, who hasn't been particularly brilliant either. He's another one on those sort of players that hasn't really kind of shot up yet. I don't know. It's another one I consider sort of putting out there. So, I'm sitting there thinking about players who are declining assets and trying to acquire, and it's going to be impossible for me now because all the leagues I play in, they'll listen to this and won't let me. But maybe even Travis Etienne's another one. He's got such a low rushing share. I think that's only going to go one way because it's been pretty poor going from the Jags, and I think they'll only get better. I say that I think they've lost their last 7 or 8 games that Trevor Lawrence has started in a row. It's a pretty bad run. It's not been good at all. But yeah, there's some players I would be looking to target and picking up on ASAP because I think they're going to be very, very useful to you. And then the Jalen Warrens and Tajay Spears it's hard to see which way they're going to go right now. They haven't been as effective as we like to be. Rico Dowdle's out there in on waiver wires. I think he's still owned in under half of leagues. He's going to usurp Ezekiel Elliott in the next 2 weeks. So again, looking at those peripheral numbers, everything's trending Rico Dowdle's way. So there's some players. I guess we're reaching out to those that are 0-2, right? I've done a lot of talking. I should let you talk. Sorry, mate. You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I don't think so. Oh, you can?
Yeah, I can.
I don't know what's going on. I think my internet's internet's not great. For somebody like Jordan Mason, do you think you should be acquiring him if you were a team that is 2-0? Like, should you be making a push for him if you can afford to?
That's a good question. I think it depends what you have to give up.
Yeah, of course.
I think, So, like, here's how I play it. It's 2-0. If I'm 2-0, I'm thinking about how I can build depth in my roster.
Yep.
So that I can get to a position where if I get to 3-0 and 4-0, I can start thinking about trading some pieces for stronger pieces. So I'm thinking about how I can do that. And the only way to do that is to stockpile assets. So I think if you can get Jordan Mason and not lose too much to do it, then absolutely. I don't know what the problem is that every fantasy manager, probably the hardest player to trade for is Jordan Mason. Because I think if you're an 0-2 team, you're going to have to give up a good piece for Jordan Mason. I think you're going to have to do that. I think you could probably get someone like, I think you'd probably give up Drake London for him. And I think people will think that's mind-boggling to do that. If Drake London isn't going to get you where you need to get to in the next 4 games, and Jordan Mason is, then you're going to have to do it. And then you just have to solve that Drake London piece later. Like, you're just going to have to figure out a way to do that. Whereas I think actually you'll have some fantasy managers that won't trade Jordan Mason at all. And you'll have some that will be really opportunistic and trade him quite comfortably. And I think it's going to be a case of what I would do is I would throw a not insulting offer, because I think that you never go the right way with that. But I wouldn't throw out my best offer. I would throw out, if I was wide receiver heavy. So if I'm sitting there wide receiver heavy, I would probably look at someone like Jameson Williams, because you probably drafted Jameson Williams as your 5th, 6th wide receiver. He's probably performing right now as your 3rd best wide receiver. There's a pathway to where he could go either way. He could either maintain where he is or he could go down. I don't know which way it is. I'm being brutally honest. I genuinely don't know. It could be that he sticks on the trajectory and that's great. And you can, but the thing is, you're taking an unknown commodity for a known commodity. You know what you're going to get out of Jordan Mason for the next 4 weeks, which is you're going to get RB1 performance. And if you're really weak in that area and you don't have anyone to trade in that area, but you've got like a Jameson Williams, that might be a trade that might feel a bit uncomfortable, but might be one that goes through. And if that doesn't work, then you have to look at where else you can go up from there. I probably wouldn't go too much higher than there, but that's for me, that's a good place to start, because it shows you're serious, whilst at the same time, it doesn't give away the whole farm. There's a logical trade there to be done. Whereas if I think about other receivers that you could probably trade, hard one. I mean, you could try Shaheed if you've got him. That could be an interesting one to try and do. I don't know if that goes through, but that's probably a fair offer. Calvin Ridley off his performance last week. That could be a good one to do. I don't know if I want to be tied to the Will Levis Express for too long. So I'm not sure if actually that's not a bad trade to do. Because I think that's going to be a roller coaster no one's going to predict. It's going to go each way. I think if you're looking at, I'm just trying to think of other players here that can make some sense. I mean, you could try Jerry Jeudy after his performance. I'm not sure that's going to work, but that's probably not a bad shout. Maybe even Stephon Diggs, but I don't think you'd probably want to do that. You could try the likes of Christian Watson and the other receivers that aren't Jaden Reed. I'm not sure that works, but feel free to give it a go.
It's a tough one with Mason though, because the person who's either drafted him late as a handcuff to McCaffrey or won the waiver bid on him is essentially thinking they've got not Christian McCaffrey but high end production for the next 4 weeks. And if that 4 weeks takes them from 0-2 to 4-2 or 3-3 or 2-0 to 6-0 because they've essentially now got 3 bell cow running backs, I almost feel like whilst he is the player to go and get, it's very difficult to go and get him because he's going to be higher than he's actually worth. Because if CMC comes back in 4 weeks, then you've almost paid too much of the farm, haven't you?
Yes and no. I think I agree with that. In there's some sentiment that I absolutely agree with, but I also think of it from we don't know what's going to happen with Christian McCaffrey. 1, 2, the season isn't that long. You know, we got to get rid of this Premier League mindset of it's 38 games. It's not 17 games. 2 have gone. We're already over 10% of the season done. The fantasy season is even shorter. It's 14 games.
Yeah.
So 1/7 of the fantasy season is done, right? The regular fantasy season is done. So it's 14 games. Get the 17 games out of your mindset. It's 14 games. You're 0-2. You got 12 games left. You need to win 8 to get in, minimum. And 8 might not be good enough. You might need to win 75% of your remaining games to get in. There's no point thinking about the last 4. You need to think about the first 4. And so, you know, you got to think of it in 3-4 chunks, 3x4 chunks. So,
and I guess
12 games left. If you get 3 wins out of the next 4, and Jordan Mason is the reason for that, you're back in the race. You can think about what you need to do, and then you have to hope that another waiver wire player comes along that can supplement what you kind of lost in your trade. And it could happen. Again, Quentin Johnston's out there now. You could make a trade for Jordan Mason tonight, supplement with Quentin Johnston. Now, I think Quentin Johnston, I'm going to do my sort of the rest of the season rankings. It quite possibly is he's going to be a top 36 receiver for me for the rest of the season. I don't know for sure, but I think he's going to be in that ballpark. And I think when I'm looking at players that you're going to lose out to get him, I don't think you're going to lose too many players that are ranked loads higher. And if they are, I don't think across the regular season, the points per game are going to be that significant. You know, you might trade off 2 points a game, which is not a lot. And, you know, you've got to get rid of the difference between the wide receiver 34 and the 24 and the wide receiver 36 might be 2 points a game. And you have to think of that sort of mindset of if it's only 2 points a game, but Jordan Mason's going to give me 8 to 10 points a game, who's really winning that trade? Yes, I've given up a piece, but if I pulled in some supplemental pieces to make up for the shortfall at that position, I might lose 2 points here to gain 8 points there. And that's kind of how you have to view the strategic element of the roster. So it's hard. You probably will have to quote unquote overpay, but it's about net points. So if Jordan Mason is going to be your RB1, let's say you've lost Christian McCaffrey and you've lost, I don't know who else, but let's say you're struggling at the position and you're currently rolling out, you know, like Zach Moss as a starter. Jordan Mason to Zach Moss could be 12 points a game.
Yeah.
Legitimately could be 12 points a game. In fact, I'll tell you what it currently stands at. Jordan Mason is averaging 17.1 fantasy points a game. Zach Moss with his touchdown is averaging 9.9 fantasy points. Sorry, Jordan Mason's 19.8 fantasy points a game. Zach Moss 9.9. So you're talking about 10 points a game right now. Zach Moss to Jordan Mason. That's over 2 games, I grant you. But 10 points a game is significant, right? So if you have to give up 4 points a game at wide receiver to gain 10, that's net 6. That's significant. That could be the difference between winning and losing games. Think what you lost your last weeks by. If you're in one of those like custom scoring leagues and it could go stupid, then obviously that you have to weigh that up. But in a redraft or PPR, like a PPR or a half point or a standard, those points per game are significant. You just have to sit there and think about how you're going to get more on there. And Jordan Mason's kind of the one out there that you think you can get. It will be available in more leagues than not. Is my gut feeling, because of the timestamp on him. And if McCaffrey doesn't come back, then you win the lottery, and that's as simple as that. But yeah, I do like maybe attacking someone like Brian Robinson Jr. could be a really good one because he could be on people's benches. Jerome Ford could be a good one. Rico Dowdle could be a really good one. You know, they're the three right now I look at and think they are outside of Jordan Mason. There are three players you can acquire. They're not sexy, but they could really do. They can really get you where you need to get to at a reasonable rate. So. Yeah, I think if you can acquire them and then look to get someone like Quentin Johnston, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson off the waiver wire, I think that's going to put you in really, really good stead. And then try and trade for someone like Michael Pittman. I think, you know, if you can try and get those pieces together, you might end up having a really, really good team in a week or two, and that might be enough to save your season.
Yeah, that could get you set right up for the end, for the big push. That is, as you mentioned,
breaking news. Marshawn Lloyd has gone on injured reserve. So you better add Emmanuel. God, his name's just totally escaped me. What is his name?
I don't know.
I had him as a waiver wire ad last week. I can hear myself. It's really...
I can't help you.
I've got it. Don't worry.
Go get the Packers running backs.
Emmanuel Wilson. Yeah.
Okay.
Go get Emmanuel Wilson. Just add that to the list now. Marshawn Lloyd going on IR. There's no competition there. Yes, it's Josh Jacobs' backfield. But Emmanuel Wilson, especially with Malik Willis there, is going to get some work. So those two combined, Lloyd and Wilson and Bo Melton, combined for 13 carries last week. They ran the ball 53 times last week, the Packers, which is significant. So buy Emmanuel Wilson. If he's on your waiver wires, go pick him up. I'm not sitting here pretending like he's going to be a huge, but if something happens to Josh Jacobs and you know you're in a great spot, especially now Marshawn Lloyd's out for 4 games.
Exactly that. Right, Rush Nation. That's going to do it for the week 2 review. Murph is still going to be in your inbox throughout the week, dropping the rest of the shows that he does religiously every week, and we appreciate you for that, my friend. Anything else, or is that us? We jetting?
I'm trying to think if there's anything useful. I hope it's been useful. It's a bit of a different episode than I think most people are used to. But I don't think at 0-2 it's too drastic to start thinking about like last chance saloon, because I don't think you've got long left. So yeah, I think just tune into the stuff that we're going to do the rest of the week, and we'll get start sits done. We'll get other pieces out to you, but yeah, just think about what your roster and how you can shape your roster, and also the wide receiver cornerback stuff I do, which I post on a sort of Thursday with Fantasy Pros, is something you want to get into as well.
Absolutely. Right, Rush Nation, that is going to do it for today's show. It's been a good one. Murph, I appreciate it as always, my friend. But until next week, Rush Nation, don't forget, keep rushing.